All right, how many of you guys actually work in IT right now? Who works in IT? All right, good deal. How many guys are proficient at both operating systems? Who's proficient at both operating systems? You don't see that anymore. We're going to get into that and how you can actually, is that Carl? I love you, Carl. Oh, it's on camera, I'm sorry. All right, anyway, you know, the biggest thing about breaking into IT is folks today either have a mindset that they need to be either all Windows because, you know, 96, 97% of all desktops that are out there that are running Windows, that they need to troubleshoot it, and they think that the learning curve for Linux is just too difficult. Now, Linux does have a steep learning curve, especially as you get into the deep things. You know, if you're doing Linux and you're doing Peppermint and you're doing Ubuntu, you're only scratching the surface of it, but it's a good place to start. We're going to talk about that. You know, the biggest thing is the mindset that we have today is it's always Linux versus Windows, and it's like the Linux guys are like rawr, and then the Windows guys are like rawr, and it just kind of culminates from there, where people get into these battles where they want to hold on to the knowledge that they obtain, and they don't want to train other people. So when you're at events like PhreakNIC, or you're at events like DEF CON or Black Hat, or even if you go to the Middle Tennessee Cyber Summit, which I work pro bono with the Tennessee Department of Safety and Homeland Security, and we put together the Middle Tennessee Cyber Summit that happens at MTSU annually. Now, this year we did not have it, and we actually went to West Tennessee, where we have speakers like Jason E. Street or Betsy Woldenberg, or we have attorney generals there, the FBI, so you get to see the government side and you see the civilian side also. But you need to go out and you need to network with individuals, and the people who just held their hands up that are proficient both in Windows and Linux. You know, when somebody is new, don't criticize them whenever they're breaking into IT. So, you know, the biggest thing is, I put up here, you know, how are we training the next generation of IT professionals? Now, a lot of you guys are saying, well, I know 99% of what you're just about to say, but it's good that you actually stay here and listen to this because of the attitudes that we are developing, where we're not helping people as much. Now, some of you guys are sitting there and you have helped people that are new in IT. But anyway, let's go forward. And guys, I apologize. If you've ever seen me speak, I usually am dynamic and I actually scream and blah, blah, blah. But about a week ago or so, I lost my mom and she had passed away, so I'm not in the right mindset, but I'm going to get there. Plus, if you hang out, I think I bought 3 extra t-shirts and some goodies we're giving away. I'm going to give away a Garmin GPS that attaches to laptops so that you can do Wi-Fi surveys or whatever. But all you have to do is just answer some questions in the end that either involve Linux or Windows. So if you know both, you're probably going to fare well during this little thing that we're going to do. Anyway, this is just some of the things that we've wanted. Some of the accolades. I come from the Tennessee College of Applied Technology in Shelbyville. We actually have been to the White House because we work with high school students. We have a CTE program. I'm not here to promote and market our school, but I want to tell you a little bit of background about me and how we teach versus how a lot of traditional colleges teach. Now, recently I even spoke at the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine involving malware that's out there that's developed in usually developed in a Linux environment, and it attacks other Linux devices such as medical devices and what have you. But, you know, so we've got all these accolades, but it doesn't mean anything because I'm really an idiot with 30 years experience, and that's the God's honest truth. Because if you're sitting in the crowd today and you think that you know everything, you probably don't, because every day you're reading about something new, right guys? But anyway, whenever we look at IT, I always have these things that I always want to look at before I get started. Now, you know, number one, if you're an employer, don't expect a 5 or 10 year seasoned person when you get hired. How many of you guys, when you broke in IT, they said, if you had a little bit more experience, we would hire you? And then some of you got your lucky break and you broke into IT. And, you know, the biggest thing today when we're working with recruiters is those recruiters will come to us and they'll say, oh, do you have anybody that's really experienced? And you know, the way we teach is we usually do 2 hours of lecture, we do 2 hours of hands-on, then they have 2 hours of homework. You're with me 30 hours a week, 52 weeks out of the year. You know, you may get that little Christmas break and that Thanksgiving break or what have you, but in 1 year, you actually do more time in front of our face at the schools that we teach. And we decided when we taught IT people, we're going to do it right. So that whenever we're doing our hands-on, you're in there, you're joining domains, you're doing Roman profiles, you're helping around the school, you're fixing things, you're touching Linux, you're touching a little bit of Mac, you're doing all these different things. But even with that experience, we have people call and they say, hey, do you have anybody there that's got 10 years experience? I got news for you, Mr. Recruiter, they wouldn't be in school. But we have a 92 to 94% placement rate, which is really high in the nation today, and we have a 98% retention rate. But here's the other rules. If you're an experienced IT person, I just said this, educate those people and your peers. There's a big desire not to help one another because we see knowledge as power and we don't want to give up what we know. There's that intimidation factor. In the old school days when I started learning IT, one of the first things that happened was I was put underneath someone. His name was Jerry Curry, and Jerry actually was my mentor. So wherever he went, I went. And he had this golden rule. I would say, hey, what do I do? And it was like, try it and see. And in today's world, we don't have people who experiment. So when I come to a place like PhreakNIC, and we've got children next door playing on computers, and we've got everything from lock picking to drones that are in here, those kind of things. It's a fantastic organization, you know, to put on events like this. And, you know, I want to see the crowds where they continue to get bigger and bigger. But here's the other thing. It's not Windows versus Linux. It's really not, no matter what you think. It's fun to think about that, but the guys that just raised their hands, you're of more value to the recruiters that we talk to. And I can't name these because we're recorded and put out to YouTube, but some of the recruiters that we have is some of the largest hospital systems in the Southeast, some of the largest restaurant chains in the Southeast and their data centers, and that's where just some of our folks go to work. But if they go to work there, they better understand Windows domains, they better have a little bit of Linux skills, and they better not be afraid of touching a Mac. Here's some of the other things. You know, learn about both operating systems and don't be scared if it's a Mac, not a big deal. You can't become a white hat for $69. There's my other thing I want to get. How many guys have seen these ads lately that says $49, become an ethical hacker? It's not happening. It's not going to happen. If you experiment and you actually work, and if you do your time in what I call the ditch, and you do your help desk time, and then later you get promoted and you go into the data center, you become a systems engineer, or you go into a network, then you've got to do time. How many of you honestly have seen people who first break into IT that don't want to do their time and they go, this place just sucks, I'm ready to go, and they've been there for like 60 days and they want to know why they don't have a raise? How many people know those people? Raise your hand. And you hear it all the time. If you get me on, I will not complain. If you get me on, I'll be the best employee they ever had. They're there for 2 weeks and they're complaining, and you're thinking, I'm going to kill you next time I go to your house. That's all you can think about. But anyway, other things, you can't become an MCSC, you can't become a CCNA, you can't become a CISSP in a week, no matter what the radio tells you or television tells you. Because a piece of paper in a certification means nothing if you can't do it. Who agrees with that? Just shake your head. I mean, people come up all day long, and I'm gonna give you an example. I'll just go ahead and give you the example now. Maybe I do feel like lecturing, and I start screaming in just a minute. I don't know. I work with James Cotter. I don't work with as far as being paid, but with I work as a partner with him at the Tennessee Department of Safety and Homeland Security. And James called me and said, can you do a capture the flag? Did anybody go to the Middle Tennessee Cyber Summit in here? Anybody? All right, if you actually went to that Middle Tennessee Cyber Summit, it's about 3 years ago, we put on a capture the flag, and I'm going to tell you what we had, okay? How many guys are in security right now? Anybody? If you're in security right now in IT, the thing that happened 3 years ago was we had a lot of folks that were walking around with CISSP or other national certifications, and they had their embroidered shirt. That's really good. But one of the things that took place was we brought, and Michael was there, and we brought like 4 or 5 servers that were there, and they were set up, and they were very basic from Windows all the way into Linux. But we did things like we were FTPing a file back and forth, which sends it over in plain text, but we put them on a hub so that it could capture it if you use Wireshark. We had NetBIOS enabled, which is ports number 135 through 139 and port 445. And people weren't even hitting the servers. They began to ping each other. They were on Linux and they were pinging, and you know how Linux will begin pinging and it just keeps pinging? Well, they started pinging their partner to make sure that they were getting online, and they got their IP address. And literally, they forgot about this ping that was going on, and they had watched some Kali Linux YouTubes the night before, and they were sending these enormous packets over to their partner, and they were DOS attacking their partners, and at the same time they couldn't get in the servers. But you're talking about 500 to 700 people who worked in the profession of information technology. And that's not, I'm not being critical of all of them, but you know, the biggest thing is when I do get an education, I start talking about Linux and I start talking about Windows, it's the proficiency and skills that you actually have to develop by doing try it and see, and actually working with it and putting that time at home and those extra hours per week of experimenting with things. And you know, you can really meet some of those nerds out there, and they're the guys that are really good and proficient at Linux because they downloaded that ISO for the very first time and they installed it in a laptop. They had no idea what they were doing, but they were doing what we used to do in the golden era of IT. Today, if you get somebody to download an ISO, they're like, what do I do with it? And you're like, well, you need to make something bootable, like a DVD or a USB. You can make it bootable so you can boot up to it. It can be a live distro and you can work with it, keep your Windows at the same time, or you can actually install it over your hard drive. But if you're uncertain about this, then the next day I'll meet people that say, oh, thanks a lot, it just destroyed my Windows, I hit install now. And you know, the biggest thing is here we are, we're at the Cyber Summit and nobody can get into these individual computers. And it was very, very basic. But we had a sit down, and I went around and I made sure that I was talking to these people after the event, and I started asking them and trying to cool them off because some people were kind of getting hot. Some people that had MacBooks were slamming them down. They're like, oh, this thing is rigged or whatever. Was any of it rigged, Michael? It was just honest to God, open, easy passwords on 9 yards. But when I sat down with them, I would ask them things like, do you ever mess with Linux on the side because they're running Kali that was installed on their PC? And they go, no, you know, I work with Windows, but, you know, I watched a couple of YouTube videos or whatever, and I would encourage them, and I would say, well, it's good, you know, you need to do this, you need to be careful with it, but you can do it at your home, but you need to watch tutorials, you need to find somebody that you can network with so that you can learn how to use that. Or the other people who were actually Windows people who may be making a 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 year grand salary, and I would sit down and I would kind of talk to them, kind of butter them up a little bit, so you know, it didn't seem like we were rigging the whole thing. And I would ask them, you know, do you ever experiment with Windows? Do you go outside of the box of the 9-to-5 job that you have? And they did. And at the same time, I would ask them, have you even played with Linux and experimented with Linux? And the biggest response that we get back is no. And there's people who are sitting in this crowd right now, you may be going to work from 9 to 5 and you work in IT. That's not what it's about. It's about, you know, understanding everything. You know, 30 years ago, whenever I go back and I think about DOS, and then DOS 1, DOS 3, and I remember we went to 5, and then later it was like DOS 5.2, and I was like, oh my gosh, man, it's you know, we're becoming really advanced. And then we had Windows, and then they introduced the right click, and we were getting over into Windows 95 and Windows 2000. But I would continue to experiment with it. But as Linux had came out at that time, you didn't get the distros that you have now. Whenever you downloaded them and you just tried to install a VGA driver, it would crash. So in today's world, whenever you begin to learn Linux, we're going to tell you, or I'm going to give you some sites that you can go to, so that if you're not that Linux person, everybody's that Windows person, but we never go to the other side. And in IT, you've got to have both sets of skills. Not probably for that first year, 2 or 3, while you're at help desk, but you may still have to have it if those Mac guys come around, because they're running a version of Unix that's on there. Basically, it's Unix. Linux is basically Unix, but I think back 30 years ago on how it all came to be. But anyway, let me go forward because I can run on and just bore you to death. But anyway, I saw this really great quote that was out on a forum a long time ago, and I really respect this guy that was out there. And I really was on the forum looking for something else, and I bumped into it, and I saw the quote underneath his name, and I really liked it. And just look at this. I don't think you should choose. A good system administrator will need to know both. A good systems administrator will. You're going to walk into that data center and you're going to feel at home because you've got Server 2008 R2, you got Server 2012, we're getting Server 2016, and then you're going to take a step around the corner and there's going to be a Linux box there, and you can't go, well, I don't do that. You need to have an attitude of, I can do that, or I'm going to find out. And this guy says, I have respect for a system administrator who says, I don't know X, I only work with Y, but I'll figure it out. Does that make sense to everybody? And people don't do that today. People are like, either they want to proclaim that they are an expert. I'll tell you real quick, fast, in a hurry, I'm not an expert. And when Google came out, I was like, where have you been? 30 years ago, this is true. We had to call a guy in Knoxville so that we could get a driver, I'm not making this up, for a Turtle Beach sound card that we couldn't find because you couldn't download drivers even in some of the bulletin board systems, but it was a bartering process. We had to send him 25 and a quarter floppy inch disc so that he could send the drivers to us. The way we networked, it was a barter system. And in today's world of Google, and I've got people, and people back then were saying, I'm going to figure out that VGA driver that we were just talking about in Linux so that I can learn it. And I'm going to figure out Windows, because Windows didn't used to be as easy as it was either, because we actually had dip switches and we had to worry about RQs. We really had to worry about them. We didn't have, and we had RQ conflicts all the time. You plug a modem in, your mouse would stop working. You unplug your mouse and your modem would work. It was just a crazy world back then. But you've got to learn both of them, and that's one of the best attitudes I saw. The guy didn't proclaim his expertise in Linux or whatever, but in that forum, whatever I was looking for, I just saw underneath his name, and I thought, that is a great little thing. But anyway, think about what you know now. Who is not in IT now, but you want to be in IT? Anybody? A couple of people, okay? Now, and you don't have to answer that, but one of the biggest things that you've taken is you've actually came to an event where you can network with people, but don't be scared to ask them what's going on. And not only to listen to these speakers, is to actually reach out to them if they give you an email address and get some knowledge from them. And that's how you break into IT. And whenever you break into IT, you may get lucky, you're not going to be a system admin. Let's just go ahead and break that to the guys that just raised their hand. You may get lucky and be a sys admin, which is cool. But anyway, think about what you know. Now, when you see this, you've got people in here who think Windows, and they see that, and they go, oh, okay, I could do all that. And then you have those people that are in here that do Windows and they do Linux. And if you ask those people who know Linux, you better know everything that's on the board that you think you're an expert at in Windows. You may not be exposed to that right now, and there's a million other things that are out there. And by all means, is this not everything? Because if you were to go through one of our programs, we have a list and this plethora of stuff that you got to know in today's world. And that Internet of Things only listed 2 things down there. There's a gazillion of those things that are there now. But whenever you see computers and you see workstation, if you know how to install, hardware is hardware is hardware 99% of the time if you're going to learn it, okay, unless you run into something new. But what you've got to have that knowledge that, yes, I can take Windows and I can install workstation, I can install Windows. I'm a computer expert. Yeah, well, kind of. But at the same time, you better look at a workstation. You better say, can I install Linux on a workstation? Because you're making your first move towards putting a Linux-based server on at the same time. But whenever I list these things, if I say databases, you've got to think that closed source, things like Microsoft SQL, but in the same sense, you better start thinking about MySQL, because if you do get that opportunity to break in IT, and what has this got to do with Linux versus Windows, is normally you're going to see MySQL. Of course, it will run on Windows, but normally you're going to see it on a Linux distro, and it's going to be running Apache, and it's going to be connected to MySQL when it comes time to go to work. That's why you've got to know that if you do walk into a data center, or you're going to be put in charge of some servers. I mean, that's just an example, so you've got to know both. As you're going down and you see Office Suite, primarily it's going to be Microsoft Office, is going to dominate, because the 95 to 98% of those workstations out there are going to be Windows, but you better know everything about it. But whenever you move into Linux, you start seeing routers and switches. But the biggest thing is, whenever you get to routers and switches, you better get used to a CLI or command line interface, because everything is not going to be a GUI. So, you know, if you want to break into networking, a lot of times it's not going to be a GUI. You may have to go to a CLI, and you're going to have to do that programming from that CLI, and you're actually working with a small version of Linux. But security. When you move over to security, one of the things that we proved that we've actually went into capture the flags is, how many of you would think Linux would fare better than a Windows machine in a capture the flag? Anybody believe that? It's not true. It's not true. It's based on the skill of the user. Does that make sense? It's based on the skill of the user. In fact, we went one-on-one, and I thought, hey man, I'm going to bring a Windows machine to see if I can actually place in a capture the flag that we actually had. So I brought a Windows machine in because I was used to bringing Linux boxes in. And just because you have Windows doesn't mean that it's necessarily unsecure. It depends on how up to date you are, whether you have your patches, whether you've looked at those CVEs that are out there, and you've taken those extra precautions to actually harden your system. And I can prove that in just a second. We're going to give you just a little screenshot, and it's going to cause everybody to go, ugh. But you have to remember, I'm also a Linux user too, okay? So anyway, let's go forward. As we go forward, the very basic commands. For those people who are out here and you only have done Windows, and you just see very, very, very basic commands, go up and look for those differences. And start out very basic. Now the Linux guys are going, this is kind of a dumb seminar, a dumb lecture. It's okay, because you're the guys that need to help those Windows guys. At the same time, let me tell you how you get, well, I'll get there. I'm sorry, kind of getting excited. But anyway, but learn these very basic commands, and don't be afraid if you only do Windows, because you're going to touch Linux. How do we know this? I'm going to show you that in just a second too. And I'm going to say this again, I don't know everything and never will. When I think I'm good at computers, I meet the next person who's better. I guarantee you, everybody in this crowd, you go, man, everybody turns to me, I am it. And then you meet somebody and you're like, oh my God, this guy's an alien. But anyway, lessons that we learned, 2014 or so, we have 500 systems, exactly what we're talking about. And of course, I'm just showing just a couple of setups that were here. We actually had MySQL, we had an SA password that was set to 1234, a Microsoft SQL server. We also had a MySQL server that was there. Same thing, people couldn't get to the tables, they couldn't make ODBC connections to it, they couldn't find any of the data, and I think the points there, and I'd have to look at Michael, I don't know, it's like 100 points if you could just get the SQL database or something. And nobody got it in 2014. Nobody could get the FTP. We actually gave out these medals. And there was one group, I believe, that actually earned the medal because they got one flag, and then we gave away the rest of the medals through sympathy. Okay? In 2016, we did something that was kind of opposite. And what we did was, whenever I was scheduled to speak, and we actually brought SCADA in, we brought some Internet of Things, and we showed how easily some of these things could be hacked. In fact, I was out in the little cafe area out here with Michael earlier, and I was showing him an IoT thing that my wife had just bought. If she ever sees something that she thinks is unsecure and it goes on sale, this little thing is a plug-in, and it said, and the package had been opened and closed, and I think she bought it for like $1 or $2, and it said, cannot get password, okay, will not set up. It was in the clearance zone. So I take it out of its package, I plug it in, and what it is it's and Michael's going to get it out real quick, is basically it plugs into an outlet, and it's a remote outlet, so you can cut lights on or off, or sprinklers on or off, or a heater or whatever. And that's the little guy right there. So whenever I plug it in, the SSID comes up, and it says, the SSID, I see a set of numbers, and it starts off SER. And I said, is that the serial number? Is it broadcasting the serial number? I said, surely, if I go online and to the Google Play Store and I download this app for this, it surely is not broadcasting its serial number where I can actually just plug it in. So when I loaded the app says, the serial number is your password for this device. and they've sold millions of them. And of course, here I am with my Android, and I said, no way. And of course, I'm over at wireless, I connect to it, and I said, oh, the SSID password, what if it's the same? And I put the serial number in it, and I said, no, it's not. It's password or admin. So I put in password, it connects to it. And then when I have the app, it says, what's the serial number of your device? And I plug it in, and I'm sitting there turning the lights on and off. My wife goes, she actually does that. And I said, find out how many of these were sold. She actually went online. It was several millions of these things are sold per year. And this thing's actually had firmware update since. It says there was nothing in the documentation for it that says it recommends that you change your SSID, which it didn't matter. Because I said, what happens if I do change the SSID? I've changed the SSID and I ran Wireshark, okay? And whenever I ran Wireshark and actually did a packet capture, I looked at it, it still broadcast the serial number. So I just threw the serial number back in, I got the lights back on and off. But anyway, and I looked for a place to actually change the password for it, and it said they were working on a fix for that. And they had been out for several years. But anyway, lessons learned, whenever we teach how to scan networks, how to run Wireshark, when we teach port numbers, whenever I go to conferences and I go to seminars, like right now, Mike, grab a t-shirt out of there. I'm just going to, this is a quiz time, and you can win a t-shirt. Here we go. If I say what port number is SNMP, right off the bat, raise your hand if you know that port number. What is it?
UDP 161.
There you go, throw them a shirt. It's 160, 161, and 162. If that's not the right size, go out and say the speaker said you could trade it up, okay? Now, here's the thing. Why do you have to know port numbers? To make connections to the individual devices whenever you're doing configuration to secure the device. And that regardless of whether it's Windows or Linux or Mac, it's all going to be the same, yes or no. Now, if I ask another port number and I say, I want to know MySQL and I want to know Microsoft SQL's port numbers, raise your hand. Stephen, do you know it? MySQL? Microsoft SQL? Well, the reason you have to know those is whenever you do configurations, whenever I went into Linux and I set up Apache and I set up MySQL, one of the very first things that you begin to learn is, okay, I'm learning Linux and I'm beginning to learn Windows, but I need to learn how to secure them, which you're going to see in just a minute, because the lessons learned is if people don't know these basic things, you're going to get something that's going to be a little bit different.
3306.
3306. Did you Google it?
Yeah.
And that's okay. Because you know what you have? You got the power of Google. Throw them a shirt. And Microsoft, but I'm going to give you this. Microsoft SQL is what port number? It's 1433, and it could be 1434. And, you know, did I just commit this to memory? No. Usually when I'm working inside of a data center, one of the very first things that I'll do, especially in our server room, is where we've got these default port numbers. If somebody is scanning our network, and we keep this at the school so you can come by any time of the day, is we've got this printout, and I call it, it was just a 7-minute attack that came from China, and it's 5,000 pages. It's only 1/10 of that log that happened in 7 minutes. And what were they doing? They had found a port number in one of our honeypots, and we left the default ports up there, 3306, for the MySQL that was running in the background in 1433, which was running Microsoft. And of course, we keep default SA logins so that if they get in, we can gather that intelligence and throw them over the firewall so that we can block them, where our real MySQL server is running on port number because we've changed it. Does that make sense? And we do that. So whenever you begin to learn Windows and you begin to learn Linux, you've got to start learning about the security portion of it and what have you. But do I know, the question becomes, do you know enough? The answer is always no.
I'll have to ask again later.
That's fine. Hey, I'm old now. I mean, every gray hair that comes out, it's like 15 million brain cells just go away. Anyway, which one is more secure? And most people, the argument will be, okay, Linux is more secure. And that's not true. Windows is more secure, right? No, that's not true. Mac is more secure. That's not true. Not in today's world. Don't yell at me or punish me for this now. Hang on, people. Now, if you actually check this out, this is from Zone-H. If you go up there daily. The number of Linux machines that become defaced and that are broke into every day is phenomenal. Why would you think that? Why would you think that? Anybody?
let's see here. I got a small little server that I'm running my website on. I don't check it but once every 3-4 months. Patching, it's out of the question.
Patching's out of the question. You're just sitting there running it. It's sitting there in the background, or the people who are installing it aren't experts in it, but they heard that Linux would be the best alternative. That's a hypothesis. And they go, well, and the thing of it is about Linux and reliability, where it runs and it is rock solid, is absolutely true. But if you don't go up there and patch it, just like you're saying, it's going to be unsecured, right? Okay. Now, but do you see Windows on there? Absolutely. Does Windows get, the latest ransomware that had actually came out, took advantage of SMB? SMB, when we talk about server message block, what port number is server message block?
500.
Nope. 500 is actually VPN.
445.
Who said 445? Come here. Reach in the bag. Pull this out for you. That bag. You might like this, you may not. Unzip that, the other zipper. Given the GPS that's actually in there, you can use it with this Dumbler. And whenever you do that, that guy right there, you can actually use that GPS like $35, $40 value, but just throw it into a regular laptop, download this Dumbler. You can actually go a little war driving, maybe, I'm not saying. But if you do that, you can actually export the KML files and you can actually make maps of wireless or whatever whenever you do site surveys, or you can use it inside of a building. So you just want a GPS. But, the biggest thing is like, I've seen people, and I went into organizations, and they're like, well, I just put a brand new Barracuda firewall in place and I can't go anywhere. I said, that's because the defaults on this Barracuda firewall is everything is closed. So you got to do things like open up port 80, you got to open up HTTPS 443, you got to have 53 unless you have an internal DNS. So you got to worry about those things. And, so when we back off and we get to Linux, usually it's those individual people who don't have the experience, or they've heard that somebody has set up a web server and they do the same thing. But anyway, whenever you look at this, and it looks like I'm still picking on Linux, and I'm not, you're going to see that the Linux kernel had some of the most vulnerabilities that were out there. Why did the Linux kernel have the most vulnerabilities out there? Because the kernel can actually be changed for each little version of Linux, and there's a gazillion different versions, all the way from those embedded devices and those IoT devices all the way to all the different distros. So you're going to see that there are vulnerabilities, and this actually comes from CVE details, so you can go over and look at it, but Windows is unsecure too. So whenever you're going into the workplace, why do you have to know both? And I'm pushing on security is you've got to know about the security of each one, and you've got to keep it up to date, but we're going to go forward. Anyway, and of course, whenever we go over and look at Microsoft and you come down here, they've had over 5,200 known CVEs come out just for security. And whenever you look at it one way, and you look at the unique vulnerabilities, you're going to see things like Linux kernels, but whenever you come over to Microsoft, because more people use it, it becomes a bigger target, and the attack surface is unreal globally. So, what skills do you need to develop before you go into the workplace? And this comes from 30 individual recruiters from Fortune 100 to Fortune 500 companies that are out there. Number one is customer service, because in today's world, everybody in this room, whenever you go somewhere, you've had a bad experience when you're the customer and you're the gentle customer, and the people who are on the other side of the counter are like barking back at you. And one of the first things recruiters say is, we've got a contract with so-and-so. They can become a full blah blah company badged later, so they work full-time for the company. But the reason they ask us to be recruiters for them is one of the number one problems that we have in today's world is customer service. Now, this is going to go into Windows, and it's going to go into Linux too. And I went, that's the number one skill they got to have in today's world. This has changed over the last 6 years. 6 years ago, it's like, hey, do they know Windows? They got a little bit of Linux skills. Can they answer the following questions? Do they know the difference between IP config and IF config? Do they know the difference between? And you're going down through there, and we actually are changing where and I'm not going to get into that entire speech, but our whole process that we work in IT, it is a privilege to work in IT, but you got to remember everybody is the customer. It's out there. Number two, they ask they have worker ethics because they can't get anybody to show up to work anymore. Anybody experiencing that in IT that work in IT, don't raise your hand because you're probably calling out your coworker. Okay, well that's cool. But you actually see that where it's like, so-and-so ain't here again today. Are they going to do anything? But they're so dead.
The interview.
What's, oh,
What do you show the interview?
I cannot, of course, say this person or whether it was a student or whether it was an individual that I know or what have you, but I know that people bring their mothers to interviews now. We were told this by recruiters. Okay? But as you're going down, the ability to analytically think and problem solve. Google is not your... There are a bazillion data centers that are out there. When you walk into it, you go to a locker and you lock your phone away because they don't want pictures and stuff, and you get in there, you got to fix things without Google. I love Google, though, especially after 30 years of trading floppy disk and stuff for answers. Anyway, the ability to network and communicate with other people on their team. We have a tendency today in IT to silo things out. Oh, that's the Linux guys, that's the Windows guys, that's the help desk guys, that's the network guys, that's the server guys. They don't talk to one another. Every now and then they'll send a memo to each other, and then you have shadow IT that you got to worry about because little Bobby took a course online, and he is now the resident computer expert, and the IT people are fighting little Bobby or little Betty. Anyway. But you need to be able to network with others. The other thing, you better know about Windows and Windows-based domains. Even if you're a Linux guy and you go, well, Linux is so powerful and I don't have to worry about a domain. If you're going to go to work in IT, you got to know that. But as you go down, you better have network skills that you can work with managed switches. You better be able to do wireless access points. You better be able to do bridges. You better understand antennas. You better understand spectrum analysis. You may go, well, I don't know anything about wireless because of my job, I just do this. With as dynamic as our economy is today, you better know a little Linux, you better know a little Windows, you better know a little wireless, you better know a little everything. But it's going down. Now, this is what the 30 recruiters called out, and they said applications. Do they know applications? Do they know the difference between a PST and an OST file? Can they even set up email? Did they know that you can set up ODBC to an SQL server from Microsoft Excel? You may have to do that when you work in IT. So everything that comes out in IT, it is Windows and it is Linux on the OS side, but you better have these other skills. But what started appearing about 5 years ago or so is they started asking, do they have some Linux skills? Because in our data center, we run Linux and we want to give our sysadmins a break every now and then. And I don't want just Windows guys coming in here. Now, these are recruiters telling us this for jobs that are $40,000 to $60,000 that are right in Franklin. Now, that's true. Now, these are just, and this is an average that we came out with that they have asked for. And of course, what I put up there is certifications in higher education. I've already said it, but remember, if you are certified, you're saying you can perform that task, that you're an expert. I tell my students all the time, if you come out of the testing center, I'm proud of you that you certified and you memorized the book, but did you pay attention whenever you were in class and we were doing hands-on? If we were doing a NetSH and we were resetting our WinSock or resetting a firewall, or we were using NetSH to actually run so that we could run a script across our network so that we could see what was going on. Or, did you learn anything that you can do? I'm proud that you're blah, blah certified when you come out. But, and the other things, if you're going to earn a certification, first get the hands-on, and I put, or go to school where you can get the hands-on. Certifications are great, and a lot of times there are different authorities that are going to require companies to see if you're ISO 27000 certified. The security portion of it, where they want that security plus CE. If you go into the government, it's the foundations of security. And if you haven't taken a CompT exam lately, they're getting harder and harder and harder and harder. Like the CSA plus, they used to be so easy. You can memorize a VCE and you already did it. It's like boom, you can just knock it out. But of course, if I go back and I look at CCNA and I go and I look at Network Plus today, they are comparable, except for those Cisco, the individual commands. But, Windows and Linux both require skill, and you better get those. Some of the certifications that recruiters have asked us for, A+. They ask us because they want to see it, not that you built a gaming rig at home, but we're setting up we're actually setting up a serial port to a SCADA or PLC device. You know, if they were to ask the bits and parity, could you go in and set FIFO and go in and set the bits to 8N1 and make it communicate with PLCs? PLCs primarily today are Ethernet, but if you get into an organization that does manufacturing, you may have PLCs that are out there, and you better know a little Linux so that if you remote into some of these PLCs so that you can get in there and you can actually walk through an individual configuration. Now, the other thing is Network Plus. We have a request for that all the time right here in Middle Tennessee. Security Plus, of course, we have a lot of government contractors that we work with. Microsoft, such as the 7698 Windows 10, or at least the Microsoft certification, because in today's world, they want to know, not that you say, yes, I can join it to a domain, yes, I can make a roaming profile, yes, I've installed Windows before, but if you have those certifications, you make sure that you put the skills on your resume that you can physically do it, and you justify that. But other things, server, usually Microsoft Server, of course CISSP is still in demand, Linux LPI, and as you move up this chain, what we see primarily is 1 through 4, whenever organizations and companies ask for it. And what they're seeing today is the people who are actually technically proficient, they prefer over, I'm not insulting anybody here, they prefer over the college graduate today. But they prefer college graduates if you're going to move upward. So if you ever break into IT, a lot of times you may have to go back to school because you'll never stop learning. But, you know, the biggest thing is when you leave here today, if you're proficient at both of them, just remember to help other people. If you're not proficient in Linux, go to these, and I've already said it before, go to PhreakNIC, go to DEF CON if you possibly can. Black hat tickets are ridiculous sometimes, but if you get a chance, you need to go there because it's awesome. Go to Besides, which is fantastic, and try to attend the Middle Tennessee Cyber Summit so you can hear other speakers and what they have actually seen. And, you know, the biggest thing is PhreakNIC, it is excellent price. Besides, great prices on it. DEF CON, same thing. In the Middle Tennessee Cyber Summit, you know how much it costs? Nothing. And you go there and you meet people like Jason Street, or you meet Betsy Wogenberg, you know, or you meet some of the attorney generals or some FBI guys and some government folks, and they tell you from all perspectives, from the hacker through private industry, through the government, of what not is just required out there. And you're going to hear the same thing over and over again, Windows and Linux, if you're going to advance your career. But, you know, the biggest thing is I put network with people who understand both operating systems. I'm being redundant, but download distros and trial versions of Microsoft Server. That's one of the biggest things is people will say, well, you can't afford server anyway. If you purchase it, it's too expensive. You get 90-day free trials, and you can do that over and over again until you become more proficient. You can run VMware for free, or VirtualBox. Those things are out there, or Hyper-V, which is built into Windows. On down, Linux has a higher learning curve, but don't be afraid to ask for help. Where you got to be afraid to ask for help in Linux is online. People are brutal. There's a 14-year-old who has never done anything except sit in his room, and he's learned Linux, and he can insult you and throw out commands real quick, fast, and hurry. Find people, human beings that you can actually sit down and talk with. Don't be scared. I mean, if you feel uncomfortable, friend them on Facebook, sit side by side in a cafeteria or a cafe, and you can message each other. I mean, that's how my children talk when we take them out to dinner. But anyway, you know, just some of the things that we teach, and I'm going to shut up, but there's other things that are out there. A lot of times people call themselves wireless experts, but what does wireless run? Generally, those wireless access point bridges and things run Linux. It's another reason to know that. You've got spectrum analysis that you need to do, not just change the channel. The young man that just won that GPS, if you actually look, that's a picture of our school where they did a site survey. You can actually walk around using VisTumbler, using that GPS with a standard laptop, and you just go to File, and you can actually hit export to a KML file, and you can make a map where it shows where that wireless is within 3 feet. And if you're ever doing a site survey, it's a fantastic thing to actually have. Now, other things, learn security as you begin to learn Linux, things like IP-Fire, things like Snort, because Snort's going to be an integral part of IP-Fire, and there's other things that are out there like Saracata and just a bazillion different things. But where do you start? Start out simple. Do something like IP-Fire. That's going to be a version of Linux, and if you begin to learn Linux, IP-Fire, you can set up really quick, fast, and hurry. Has anybody here set up IP-Fire before? Anybody? Fantastic distro. Other things, get PLC SCADA training. You know why? Automation is going to replace a lot of things in manufacturing and retail, period. It's going to happen. So if you can understand PLCs and SCADA, we actually brought it into the classroom, and now we require people to go through so that you can see how things are swapped, or how switches and relays work, and how the configuration works on the different OSs, and just keep up with security in general. Other things, whenever you make this commitment that, hey, in the workplace I need to know both skills, you have to commit that time, just like I said before, of every week spending an hour or two, just like you would read the news or something, and sit down and teach yourself and do what my mentor said, and do a try and see, but also keep up with news. This is old news, Shodan search engine, the hard drives that are actually in copy machines. And if you get a chance to buy things like Wi-Fi pineapples, and you want to get over in that realm of security so that you understand how to do DNS redirects, or how an evil twin could actually capture the data when people are in a place like this where you have free Wi-Fi, But anyway, is there any questions? Now, I didn't get to bring my SCADA stuff, and that was because I was dealing with this funeral thing and my mom thing and that kind of thing, so I just couldn't get everything packed up in time. Any questions at all?
You said last year you had a kind of open to the public thing once or twice a year at
TCAT.
Yeah.
And of course, guess when we planned it? We planned it during the month of October, and what I just went through.
Gotcha.
But we are planning one that's coming up in February, and I'm going to have everybody write their name down again this year. And of course, we have a free security thing where you can come down to our school, and it's like on a weekend, and we teach the very fundamentals of Wireshark. And just to give you a real quick example of some of the things we teach, I usually keep this guy. This is just a packet. I'm going to open it up using Wireshark, and let's see if I can end my PowerPoint real quick. Let me drag this over, guys, and just let that blink. Let me drag this over real quick. Over there I am. All right. Now, whenever you check this out, Wireshark, how many of y'all played with Wireshark before? Anybody ever capture passwords on it? It's really fun to actually capture passwords. Not in public. You should not do that in public. Let's go ahead and cover that. But let's just say that you're in public. How many of y'all have used, be honest, when you're in IT, how many of y'all have actually used Wi-Fi that was free? Everybody in this room has. People are like, I never use it. I always use a VPN. You may now, but there was a time when you used open Wi-Fi. Just to give you an example of encryption and how complex Wireshark is actually getting. If I go down real quick, I could actually go and filter it, but I didn't plan for this even. But let me look real quick. Let's see, there's a laptop. You see username. And see, I've already got this, but let me just show you, because I've given a demo before. But generally what you're going to see in Wireshark, see where that says user? See that? And it's just got a string of characters. You may not be able to see it. C25, 1Y, blah, blah, blah. And you come down, it says pass, which is password. This is what you don't realize. A lot of times you're using HTTPS. It depends on when Wireshark actually hits. I'm going to see your stuff. HTTPS is encryption, but if I'm sitting there capturing full time, and I'm sitting at said coffee shop, whatever coffee shop it is, or I'm sitting at said hotel, and I'm down in the lobby, and I'm sitting there running Wireshark the whole time, you don't know. I'm sitting over there reading a newspaper. You think I'm checking email. Well, when you go to check your email, you actually see where it says user right there, and you can see that it's encrypted, but generally what most encryption levels, if I go down, I just go to protocol preferences. These are the things that we're going to teach. I mean, this is just one section. You've seen some of the other stuff that we've done, but I hit decode base 64, and if I hit it, you're actually going to see there's the username, and if we just scroll on down, you're actually going to see there's the password right there.
Right click, follow stream.
And you can follow the actual stream, and we do that so you can actually see all the way down. So the next time you use open Wi-Fi, and I'm sitting in the same coffee shop as you, get off the Wi-Fi. No, I'm joking. I wouldn't do that. But you've got to remember, do you trust everybody in today's world? And you know, the thing of it is my Android's out in the car. I've got the same thing on my Android, so if I'm on my phone, you go, well, he's not hacking, he's on his phone. He's the only guy that's in here. I can do port scans on a phone, especially with a Droid that I've actually rooted. You know, I can do really quick port scans, and if I see that 135 through 139 or that port number 445 that's open, more than likely you've shared a folder out and you've left the everyone on there, and I'm just going to come over and I'm going to walk inside your folder because you didn't go to the security tab and actually name the individuals, or you didn't go to advanced sharing, you just left it to everyone. You went over, shared folder, you hit OK, you hit apply, and you're OK. And you know, we do these open forums where I actually do this. I don't know if you've seen us do it before, and we'll actually do something like SoftPerfect's Net Scan, the most simple tool that's out there, and I run it, and I just right click and tell it to open, and I start seeing your folders and your files and everything, because people don't take those precautions. And even in Linux, whenever they first learn how to share out files and folders, Linux, fortunately, is not going to let anybody into that folder. If I can get into that folder and you're on a Linux machine, it means you messed it up and you need to, you know, keep working. But these are the kind of things that we teach over that weekend. You get to come in for a boot camp, and we're going to move that out to February because we'd already talked about that. But we also do the PLCs. We do password captures. We show you a little bit of Nessus. We show you just that security stuff. It costs you nothing. And you come down, and here's the thing, I don't just get up here and speak about it. You sit in front of a PC and we give you the tools, and then we walk through it. And it's not just in Linux, we do it in Windows also, so that you feel comfortable when you're doing it. Okay? Would anybody like to attend that? It's absolutely free where you can actually do that. All right, I'll grab a piece of paper. You can write down your name and your email address, and we will give you an email. And I apologize because we had that going on with the family, and you know, it's unfortunate. But if you guys would like to come out and go through that little, and you get a certificate from the college system. Not that that means anything to a lot of people, but it means a lot to us. That's all I got, folks. You got to learn both Linux and you got to learn Windows. You better network with those folks, and it doesn't hurt to go up and become a member of these groups, you know, so that you can go and sit with these groups and you can learn from them, because you'll find out that the people that the National 2600, if you sit down and you ask those folks, they will actually show you some things. Okay? Any questions? That's all I got, folks. Oh, wait, before we go, got another t-shirt in there?
Yeah.
Just kind of just lob it out there. Just throw it. Don't hit it. Don't hit it until you want it. One last question. You ready? If I have SQL Server and I'm running Windows and I got a Windows-based client, I've got jumbo frames enabled, my network is fantastic, I'm on a gigabit network, I've got jumbo frames, I can shoot files over to a file server all day long. But on this SQL Server, Windows has latency whenever it talks to this SQL Server. What one thing can I do that will speed up SQL the most? To speed up the connection between that client and that SQL server, is speeded up by 33% on those Windows machines in the group policy. Anybody know that answer? It's the number one thing that when we go into data centers and we tell people about it and they change their data centers over, suddenly connections are going like that. Okay?
Lower the speed?
No. Disable LLMNR. LLMNR is multicast resolution, and generally what happens is your DNS is actually getting delays on it when it's going to that SQL server's net BIOS name. If you disable LLMNR on your images, whenever you image that PC, your connections are like that. We've seen it all over the nation. And when we tell people, especially people that use scan guns and everything that goes back to SQL servers. They're like, I didn't know that it could go this fast. And that includes MySQL. Anybody know the port number for SSH?
443.
22.
Who said 22? Give him a water bottle. Or give him the t-shirt. Or did somebody else get a t-shirt? Come get you a water bottle. All right, here we go. What is the port number for, let's just do this. What's the port number for SMTP? Who said 25? I actually heard 25 over here first. We got a water bottle for you. We got anything else left in that bag? We do. All right, here we go. What port number, if you're going to receive mail, pop 3.
101.
No.
110.
Who said 110? I got a 16 gig flash drive you can give him. It's up here. Okay, I got one more. Hang on. So I got a 16 gig flash drive for you. Let's just do one more port number real quick. Here we go. Tell me. Who said 23? Okay, he's got a water bottle. Hand him that water bottle. Yeah. There you go right there. All right, guys, that's all I got. Learn Linux and Windows and Network, folks.